My husband secretly took a DNA test because his family thought I was a gold digger. So I left and never told him I inherited $355 million. My name is Emma, and if you told me 5 years ago that I'd be a single mom living in a new state with a $355 million inheritance and zero regrets, I would have laughed. But life has a way of peeling back masks, especially the ones worn by people we trust the most. I didn't discover the truth in some dramatic shouting match. It came quietly, in the form of a sealed envelope hidden beneath our bed. I was vacuuming that afternoon, just doing my regular chores, when the vacuum hose got stuck. I crouched down to see what was underneath, expecting a toy or sock, but instead, my fingers brushed against paper. I pulled it out and saw my husband's name. My son's name. A lab logo. And suddenly, my stomach twisted. I sat down on the edge of the bed, tore the envelope open, and felt my chest tighten with every word I read. Paternity test results. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. He had taken a DNA test, behind my back. Without a single word. Not even a conversation. I wasn't angry that he questioned whether our son was his. I was broken that he didn't trust me enough to ask. I had been faithful. Loyal. Loving. And still, he let the hateful whispers of his family speak louder than my years of honesty. What cut deepest was that I had never told anyone, not even him, about my inheritance. After my grandmother passed, I was left with $355 million in estate, property, and assets. A large country house tucked in Oregon's mountains. A sprawling, operational farm. Prime real estate in 3 states. But I stayed grounded. I didn't flaunt my wealth. I didn't marry him for money, I had more than enough of my own. But they never gave me a chance. From day one, his mother called me manipulative. His sister smirked at my clothes. They thought I was some broke woman clinging to their golden boy. Now here I was, holding proof that the man I loved believed them enough to test my loyalty through our son. That day, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I planned. That night, I couldn't look at him the same. I sat across from him at dinner, our toddler happily smashing peas on his high-chair tray, and all I could see was betrayal. Not the kind that's loud or obvious, but the slow-burning kind. The kind that eats away at trust until all that's left is suspicion and silence. He looked up from his plate, gave me a smile that had once made me feel safe, and asked, "You okay?" I nodded. Lied. Just tired. But inside, I was unraveling. I replayed every moment of the past year, wondering when the doubt began. Was it when his mother came to visit and made that offhand joke, "He's cute, are you sure he's ours?" As if I didn't hear. Or when his cousin kept asking if we'd ever considered a paternity test, just for peace of mind. I had brushed it off as ignorance. I trusted my husband to defend me. To believe in me. Now I knew better. I didn't confront him that night. I needed space, to think, to feel, to figure out what came next. So I stayed up late, sitting alone in our backyard, staring at the stars. My mind wandered to my grandmother. She'd always warned me, "Wealth makes you a target, Emma. Stay quiet. Let people show you who they are." And he had. The next morning, I started gathering documents, my grandmother's will, the property titles, the investment breakdowns. I had never needed to use them before, never felt the urge to separate my assets. But now, I wanted to draw a line. Not out of spite. Out of survival. I didn't want to raise my son around people who saw me as a parasite. I didn't want to love someone who couldn't stand up for me when it mattered. And most of all, I didn't want to spend my life wondering what other secrets might be hiding under the bed. So, I made a decision. I would leave. But I wouldn't slam the door. I'd disappear. And no one would know what they lost until it was far too late. The whispers had been there from the beginning. His family never truly welcomed me. At our wedding, his aunt barely looked me in the eye. His mother insisted on using my maiden name, even after I legally changed it. At every family gathering, I felt like a guest at someone else's party. They smiled with their mouths, but their eyes told a different story. I ignored it, at first. I thought time would melt their ice. I believed love would be enough to thaw whatever judgments they held. But over the years, it became clear they didn't see me as a partner to their son. They saw me as an outsider who had snuck into their circle. And worse, they believed I had an agenda. It wasn't hard to guess why. I had never flaunted my inheritance, but they knew I didn't struggle financially. I always offered to cover trips, to help with bills, to treat people. I did it out of generosity. They saw it as manipulation. They called me a gold digger behind my back. The irony stung. The truth was, I never touched my grandmother's fortune. The $355 million sat untouched in trust accounts, along with the estate, her house, the farmland in Illinois, and the commercial properties she had acquired over decades. I lived off my own income, managed my own consulting work, and never once used that money to make myself look better in their eyes. But they didn't want to believe that. To them, I was a threat. And I now realized their poison had finally seeped into my husband's thoughts. That DNA test was not just a piece of paper, it was proof that their distrust had grown into something tangible. Something dangerous. I had to protect my son. Not just from the lies, but from the idea that his mother had to prove her worth. I would not raise him in a world where people like them held the loudest voices. So, I started planning our escape. Quietly. Carefully. Strategically. Because when someone betrays your trust, you don't fight fire with fire. You walk away with the matchbox. And you light your own path. I didn't pack in a frenzy. There were no slammed doors or angry shouting matches. Just quiet decisions and the hum of realization in the background. I knew if I confronted him, it would only turn into a performance. He would apologize. Maybe cry. Blame his family. But it wouldn't change what he'd done. He had taken a DNA test behind my back. That choice didn't come from nowhere. It came from years of letting his family drip-feed poison into his ear until he swallowed it whole. So I planned silently. I began moving money, booking appointments, finding a new school for my son. I contacted a lawyer I trusted, someone who had worked with my grandmother's estate. The same woman who had managed the paperwork when I inherited everything, $355 million spread across accounts, properties, and investment portfolios. She helped me draw up custody papers and a relocation plan that wouldn't raise red flags. I remember standing in the doorway of our bedroom, watching my son sleep. He had his father's chin and my mother's stubborn curl. He was the best part of both of us. And yet, his father had doubted his very blood. That thought made my chest ache in places I didn't know existed. My husband didn't notice anything different. I cooked. I smiled. I kissed him goodbye every morning. But at night, when he fell asleep, I'd lie awake planning every step like a secret mission. I knew the exact day I'd leave. I waited for him to go on a weekend fishing trip with his brothers, the same ones who'd once cornered me at a barbecue and asked me if I had trap baby plans. When that weekend came, I packed what mattered. A few suitcases, photo albums, documents, and a tiny box filled with letters from my grandmother. The house, the furniture, the china his mother gifted us, I left it all. I didn't want a single thing that reminded me of what they'd tried to reduce me to. I left a note. Not dramatic. Just the truth. A few sentences, handwritten on stationery I used to keep for thank you cards. I signed it Emma, because that was who I was again. Not his wife. Not their scapegoat. Just me. And then I drove away. My son slept through the first 2 hours of the drive. When he woke up, he asked where we were going. I told him we were going to start over. Somewhere people believed in love more than bloodlines. Somewhere I could breathe again. We arrived in North Carolina just before sunset. The town I'd chosen wasn't big, but it wasn't too small either. It had charm, warmth, and most importantly, anonymity. No one here knew the girl who'd been called a gold digger. No one here saw me as a threat to their son's inheritance. I was just Emma, a single mom looking for peace and a fresh start. With the help of my lawyer, I had already transferred the title of one of the homes my grandmother left me. It was a colonial-style house tucked behind a grove of trees, with a wraparound porch and a wide backyard. My son loved it instantly. He ran around pointing at everything, declaring which room would be his and asking if we could get a dog. We settled into a routine quickly. I enrolled him in school under his new last name, using one from my mother's side of the family. I didn't want anything tying us to our past life, especially not the men who had failed us so deeply. I didn't hate him, but I no longer trusted him. And trust, once broken, rarely heals in the same shape. The house came fully furnished, but I made it ours. I painted walls, planted flowers, and hung up new curtains. I even placed my grandmother's portrait above the fireplace, a quiet reminder of the woman who had always seen me for who I truly was. She believed in me even when I didn't. I hoped she'd be proud of how I was piecing everything back together. Money wasn't a problem. Between the real estate holdings, stock investments, and liquid assets, I never had to worry. But I didn't flaunt it. I dressed simply, drove a modest SUV, and when someone asked what I did, I told them I managed investments and worked remotely, which wasn't a lie. My son started to thrive. He made friends, brought home art projects, and began sleeping through the night again. That alone made all the chaos worth it. Watching him laugh without the shadow of doubt or judgment made my heart feel light in ways I hadn't felt in years. Still, there were nights I couldn't sleep. Nights when I wondered if I should have said something more, or less, or different. But then I'd hear my son breathing peacefully in the next room, and I knew I had made the right choice. We were safe. We were happy. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to apologize for the life I had inherited or the decisions I made. 3 months passed before the first message came. It was an email from a mutual friend of my ex-husband's family. The subject line read, "Hey, just checking in." I stared at it for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't open it. I knew what it was. I didn't need to read someone else's half-hearted attempt to pull me back into a past I had no intention of revisiting. I deleted it. But silence doesn't keep people away forever. A week later, I received another message. This time it was from my ex-husband, Mark. He had found my new email, though I had no idea how. The message was short, but heavy. I messed up. I lost everything. I just want to talk. I closed my laptop and sat there for a while. My heart didn't race like it used to when I thought of him. There was no fear, no sadness, just quiet. He had finally realized what he'd done, but only after the life he knew began to crumble. From what I could gather through some careful online searching, Mark had been laid off. Apparently, after I left, his performance at work declined. He missed deadlines, clashed with coworkers, and started arriving late. Eventually, they let him go. The house we once lived in was sold. His family, the same ones who once whispered that I was after his money, had withdrawn their support. Without me, he had nothing left to blame. So, the truth stood in front of him, bare and unforgiving. He was alone. But I had no desire to save him. Not anymore. What he never knew, and never would have guessed, was that while they were accusing me of being a gold digger, I had been hiding a fortune. The $355 million inheritance I received from my grandmother remained untouched in his world. I had never shared it with him. Not because I was deceitful, but because I knew his family would have tried to manipulate it. They already suspected me of scheming for his modest salary. Imagine what they would have done if they knew I was a multimillionaire all along. I read the message one last time. Then I did what I needed to do. I blocked him. I blocked the email, the number, and every trace of the life we once shared. Because I wasn't just healing. I was building. A new chapter, a new identity. And there was no room for ghosts in this house. I never thought peace could feel like this. Mornings now began with my son's laughter echoing down the hallway of our new home, a beautiful, sprawling lakefront property I purchased in cash. It had wide open windows, a wraparound porch, and enough space for my son to run, play, and dream without limitation. The old me might have felt guilty about enjoying something so luxurious. But the new me, she embraced it. I earned every square inch of this freedom. With a portion of my inheritance, I restored the farmhouse my grandmother left me. It had sat untouched for years, but now it was alive again. Fresh paint, a new garden, a small stable with 2 horses for my son, who was already in love with animals. I even converted part of the barn into a cozy guesthouse for future visits from friends. For once, my money wasn't a secret. It wasn't a weapon waiting to be turned against me. It was security. It was choice. I used the rest of the money to invest in real estate, quietly and smartly. A small apartment complex here, a couple of vacation homes there. Everything under a trust name, separate from mine. No breadcrumbs to lead back to me. If my ex or his family ever tried to find me again, all they'd find was a ghost. I wasn't hiding out of fear. I was protecting my peace. But I didn't just vanish from the world. I started a small business in my new town, a local bookstore cafe. It had always been a dream of mine, buried under years of self-sacrifice and pleasing others. Now, with my inheritance and autonomy, I made it real. I filled it with warmth, shelves of classics, tables made from reclaimed wood, and the smell of roasted coffee beans drifting through the air. People came in and stayed for hours. I wasn't just building a life for my son and me. I was becoming part of a community. One evening, I sat behind the counter, sipping tea while my son curled up with a book in the kids' corner. A customer smiled at me and said, "You look like someone who's exactly where they're meant to be." She was right. I didn't reply to my ex. I didn't need to. My silence was the final answer to a question he never should have asked. Trust, once broken, doesn't get patched with apologies. Especially not when it was buried under years of doubt and betrayal. This was the life I built, not from revenge, but from rediscovery. Months had passed since I left, and life continued with the calm rhythm I had prayed for. My son thrived, he was happier, more confident, and slept peacefully every night. I did not miss the sleepless nights filled with tension, walking on eggshells to avoid the disapproving glares from my ex-husband's family. They were no longer a shadow hanging over us. We were finally free. Or so I thought. One evening, as I closed the bookstore and turned off the lights, my phone buzzed. At first, I ignored it, assuming it was another notification or a spam message. But when I glanced down and saw his name, Nathan, I froze. I hadn't seen it in so long that it almost looked unfamiliar. My breath caught in my throat. Curiosity won over caution, and I opened the message. "Emma, I know I don't deserve to ask this, but can we talk? Please. I need to explain." I didn't respond. I locked my phone and walked out to my car, the warm evening air doing little to cool the rush of emotions building inside me. Anger. Sadness. Pity. It took him this long to reach out, and now he wanted to talk. I was sure the sudden humility wasn't from guilt, it was from loss. He'd lost his job not long after I left. Apparently, a few connections dried up when his family's name lost the weight it once carried. And just like that, the man who once let his family treat me like dirt was now texting me like I was a lifeline. I didn't owe him anything. But still, I couldn't help but wonder, what exactly did he want to explain? That he didn't believe them when they called me a gold digger. That he didn't think I cheated, but took a secret DNA test anyway just to be safe. There was no explanation that would make what he did right. No words could undo the humiliation. The way his silence backed their accusations. The way he betrayed my trust and our son's identity. Later that night, I checked his social media out of curiosity. That's when I saw it. A post from a week ago. A photo of him standing in front of an empty apartment, boxes behind him, the caption reading, "Starting over, hard lessons learned." So he was crumbling. And somehow, the one thing he wanted back was the woman he once allowed his family to tear apart. Too bad that woman was gone. I didn't respond to Nathan's message. Not the first one. Not the second. Not even the desperate voice message he left 3 days later, the one where I could hear his voice crack as he said he missed us. Missed me. I deleted it before it could dig any deeper into a heart I was trying so hard to protect. What could I even say? Sorry your life fell apart after you doubted your wife and listened to your family's venom. I owed him nothing, not an explanation, not a breadcrumb, and certainly not forgiveness. He wasn't reaching out because he saw my worth. He was reaching out because he lost his safety net. A man who stood back and let his relatives call the mother of his child a liar and a leech, now wanted her to fix his broken life. But he didn't know what I had built in the silence. My grandmother's inheritance, $355 million, a farmhouse on the river, prime real estate across 2 states, hadn't just been money. It had been a second chance. A reward, almost. Proof that no matter how deeply others tried to bury me, I could grow stronger. I had started 2 nonprofits, one for single mothers escaping abusive or toxic homes, and one for women trying to rebuild after emotional trauma. Every time I saw another woman walk through those doors, afraid and exhausted, I saw a version of myself. And I knew I had made the right choice. Still, there was a moment, just one, when I sat on my porch watching my son play and thought about what might have been. If he had stood up for me. If he had thrown that envelope away and told his family to keep their poison to themselves. If he had been the man I married instead of the one who slowly disappeared behind their whispers. But he wasn't. And I wasn't the woman who needed him anymore. So when another message popped up a week later, saying, "I heard about the inheritance. I never wanted your money, Emma. I just want my family back," I didn't even blink. I stared at it for a second, then turned off my phone. The peace I had now. It was worth more than all the apologies in the world. After Nathan's last message, I made a decision. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. I blocked his number. Deleted every trace of him from my contacts. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because I knew silence was the only language he'd never spoken fluently. He had always counted on a second chance. Always assumed I'd fold, explain, comfort, or return. Not this time. My days were no longer haunted by what-ifs. I had built a life that no longer revolved around being someone's daughter-in-law, someone's wife, someone constantly trying to prove her worth. I was Emma, mother to the brightest little boy I'd ever known, founder of 2 organizations that had already helped dozens of women find their footing again, and a woman finally standing in her own truth. And even though I'd inherited $355 million, including a historic countryside house, 40 acres of farmland, and several rental properties, I didn't feel rich because of the money. I felt rich because of the freedom. One quiet afternoon, as I watered the garden outside my new home, a thought struck me: how easily someone else's doubt could have stolen this peace from me. If I hadn't trusted my instincts, I might have stayed. I might have tried to fix things. I might have let guilt make decisions that were never mine to carry in the first place. Instead, I had rewritten my story. I wasn't the gold digger they said I was. I was the granddaughter of a woman who believed I was worthy of carrying on her legacy. I wasn't the unfaithful wife they whispered about behind my back. I was the woman who never cheated, on him or on myself. The woman who got accused, betrayed, and abandoned, but still chose to rise. And now, the only family I needed sat giggling in the grass, holding a worm in one hand and a half-eaten apple in the other, completely unaware that we were supposed to be broken. That, right there, was everything. That was wealth. So I walked back inside, barefoot and smiling, with no need to look back. One chilly morning, as I sorted through old paperwork in a storage box I hadn't opened since the move, I came across something unexpected, a letter I had written to Nathan months earlier. It was unsent, sealed, and tucked between a stack of medical records and property documents. My hands trembled as I opened it, not from fear, but from the weight of a version of myself I had outgrown. The letter was raw. Emotional. I had written it just after I found the DNA results. In it, I had poured every ache I couldn't say out loud. I told him how it felt to have my loyalty questioned. How I had stood silently through every cruel whisper from his mother. How humiliating it was to realize my husband trusted their doubts more than my truth. But most of all, I had written that I still loved him, that I was willing to fight for us if he just admitted what he did. Reading it now felt like opening a time capsule from a woman I no longer recognized. I didn't pity her. I respected her. She had every right to feel broken. But I wanted to reach back in time and hold her hand, whisper that peace was waiting just on the other side of goodbye. I folded the letter neatly and, without hesitation, tossed it into the fireplace. Some words are better burned than heard. Closure doesn't always come from confrontation. Sometimes, it comes from choosing not to bleed for someone who wouldn't even hand you a bandage. That night, I tucked my son into bed, and he asked a question that stopped me cold. "Mommy, why don't I have a daddy?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You have me," I said gently, brushing his curls off his forehead. "And I'm more than enough for the both of us." His sleepy smile told me he believed me. And in that moment, I did too. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, quiet, unassuming, just like the day I discovered the DNA results. I was sipping tea on the porch while my son played in the grass with our neighbor's golden retriever. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring. Then it buzzed again. And again. Finally, a text popped up that made me sit up straight. Emma. I know. About the inheritance. Please. Just talk to me. Nathan. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Somehow, I'd always known this day would come. The moment he realized I hadn't just left, I had vanished into a better life. One that didn't need him. How did he find out? Maybe through my cousin who'd posted about the winery opening. Or the real estate deal that made headlines. Either way, the secret was out. I was no longer the poor girl from a working-class family they thought I was. I was Emma, the woman who had quietly inherited a $355 million fortune that included not just cash, but acres of land, a lakeside house, a family farm that had survived 2 wars, and a portfolio of prime commercial real estate. And I never told him. That was what must have crushed him more than anything. The realization that I'd had the upper hand the whole time. That while his family had mocked me as a gold digger, I had been sitting on more wealth than all of them combined, and didn't think they were even worth a conversation. The calls didn't stop. Nathan left voicemails. Sent emails. Begged. Apologized. He wanted to start over. Said he made a mistake. Claimed his family had pressured him. That he never doubted me, not really. But the truth was, he did. He let them treat me like an outsider. He let their poison seep into our marriage. And worst of all, he let suspicion replace love. I blocked his number. That night, I looked out across the vineyard bathed in golden light and whispered to myself, let him learn to miss what he buried. It's been a year since Nathan found out the truth. Since he learned the woman he quietly tested behind her back was the heir to a $355 million legacy. A woman who had never needed him but had once chosen him. That choice. It died the moment I realized he didn't defend me when his family tore me down. It was buried the second he mailed that DNA kit. I still think about the day I left. Not with sadness, but with power. I packed light, took only what mattered, my son, my dignity, and a key to a life waiting for me outside their judgmental walls. Now, I live in peace. My son is thriving in a school where he's celebrated, not whispered about. We walk our vineyard together. On weekends, we ride horses at the family farm. I've donated to shelters, started a scholarship in my grandmother's name, and invested in building homes for single mothers escaping abuse. You see, my wealth isn't just in dollars. It's in freedom, in legacy, in choices reclaimed. Nathan still writes sometimes. Long, apologetic letters. Says he's changed. That losing me made him realize everything he had. But by the time he valued me, I had already learned to value myself more. His words don't sting anymore. They sound like background noise to a life filled with purpose and peace. He wanted forgiveness. What he really wanted was access. To the life I built. To the wealth he thought I didn't deserve. To the son he tried to prove wasn't his, only to discover too late that blood doesn't hold families together, trust does. And trust, once broken, doesn't come with a second key. So, no. I don't regret leaving. I regret ever believing I had to prove my worth to people who were never worthy of me. My name is Emma. And this is not a story of heartbreak. It's a story of rebirth. Of power reclaimed. Of walking away and never looking back.